one point in our life, two of our children were making some mistakes, and they were a little bit contrary to what we believe as a family. And I thought, wow, what happens if somebody receives a pile of money who's not living gospel principles? And I don't know about you, but I've never heard anybody say, wow, I inherited a bunch of money, and so I decided to go back to church and turn my life around. I used to worry, if I died today, what would happen to my kids? And how would money or prosperity affect their choices and their ambitions and their life's goals? And that caused me a lot of stress. In fact, at one point, I was ready to sign over everything I had to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, rather than risk having them have to make choices that would be difficult for them with a large sum of money. And some friends who work with a lot of donors in the church mentioned, well, what are your goals as a family? And I said, my goal is to raise worthy Melchizedek priesthood holders. And this kind gentleman, Ron Black, said, what if you can do both? You can teach your sons correct principles. My eyes immediately opened, and I said, I'm very interested. And so we started a charitable foundation. My sons and my daughter are the board of directors. That way, it gives the opportunity for them to learn correct principles, to grow and develop, and if they are worthy of their priesthood, they can then handle the inheritance and continue to do good. If they exercise their agency contrary to my beliefs, then the option is that that entire inheritance can still go to the church.
They say that religion can be the glue that holds families together, but it can also be the wedge that drives them apart. And I testify to you that that is absolutely true. And I've lived through both of those. Welcome to my channel. I'm Jenny Gage of Life Take Two, where I share my escape from Mormonism, transitioning into a totally different life on the other side. First, let's talk about what we just saw here in this video. This was professionally produced and released worldwide by not the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints itself, but by its philanthropy arm called LDS Philanthropy. I'm not a financial advisor, so I had to call a friend who is and ask them to explain to me exactly what's going on with LDS Philanthropy. And this is what I understand. If I have an estate and I want to donate that estate to the church, rather than putting that on a tithing slip and just handing it to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I would donate it to LDS Philanthropy, which has some different tax brackets, and they would then disperse it wherever it needs to be used within the church itself or other arms of the church. This little financial bubble is overseen by the prophet and first presidency of the church, but it's not officially churchy. It's more financially. This video was originally released globally, and it was specifically to prompt people who have children who have apostatized and left the church to take away their children's wills or any inheritance that they may have for them, and instead give it to the church so that it would be protected by the holy men who are in charge of the holy money that is donated to that holy institution. After some public backlash from people like myself when this was first released, it was taken down and can now only be found in the Internet Archive and on my personal cell phone. Now, this video really hit all of my buttons because for those of you who are new here, when I apostatized from the Mormon Church and began speaking publicly about some of the horrible ways in which it harmed me, my family disowned me. I have a letter that I read all the time from my own mom that she pipes up and puts into an envelope, telling me that she never wanted to see me again, even saying things like, you were a disturbed child and you've burned your bridges with your family. Hell, you've torpedoed them. Have a good life. It has been 6, almost 7 years since I've seen anybody in my family. My dad is in the very last phases of his life, and I'm not able to have contact with him because he's being held hostage by my big Mormon family, so that he is not within the grasp of the evil, satanic woman who no longer believes in the LDS Church. When people watch my channel and they see all of the things that me and my kids went through after my divorce, things like homelessness, things like not being able to afford medical care when I was critically ill during COVID, and just on a daily basis, not being able to keep up with everything that I have to keep up with in life, both physically and financially. A lot of people question, well, where's your family? Have you had any support? No, I have done all of this 100% completely, utterly alone until I met Kevin. And then at least I had that one partner. I did have assistance with housing eventually during my homeless era when my Mormon uncle just couldn't stand knowing that I was homeless when he had an abandoned guest house in his backyard, which he fixed up and let me move into at an affordable amount of rent. And that's where I've been for the past couple of years. But as my uncle was asking me to vacate that home this May, the very last thing that he said to me was, I really want you to stop doing what you're doing on social media. Your mom sends me videos all the time of your TikToks and your YouTube, and it has destroyed our relationship. So as long as you're going to continue doing this, just this, is basically like I'm not even part of the family anymore. I've had hundreds of people just ghost me. Let me play for you another little clip from this segment.
You know, it's interesting. You think about success for your children. You think about piano lessons and football and college education and good grades. And, you know, when it all comes down to it, I think about the success of my kids. And if I ran into somebody 30 years from today and they say to me, how are your kids doing? If my son has a temple recommend and is worthy Melchizedek priesthood holder, I will say my son is doing fantastic. If, on the other hand, my children are wealthy beyond measure and famous, but they're not worthy of a temple recommend, I will say my children are struggling.
For a couple 100,000 of years of human history, there seems not to have been religion. Humans were reliant on one another. Some of the earliest religious relics that we see are around death and burial. And here's how this got started. My mom, my brother, my partner would die. And instead of just burying them as they were, I would maybe bury them with a favorite comb or a ring or something else that a dead person wouldn't possibly need. And then those things began to be repeated again and again and again, showing that there was ritual and some type of faith involved in the burial of the deceased members of tribes. Fast forward a little bit in the human timeline to the advent of the written word. And then we start to see people verbalizing concepts of faith. And historians can watch religion grow up with the human race. At first, we have this really beautiful symbiotic relationship with one another, where faith is just a part of life. It's something that people may think about and may gather together occasionally to perform rituals around, but the human-to-human connection is still the priority. It is the number one most important thing, and the survival of Homo sapiens sapien depended upon us prioritizing one another first and foremost. And then we see humans expand to civilization. And we go from small tribes of, 150 to 500 people is the ideal size tribe, to building cities and towns with thousands and tens of thousands. Right in the moment that occurs, we see a really interesting and, in my opinion, very tragic thing happen. We see the development of stratification. These people are a little bit above other people's status. Oh, those people are the most amazing people. And power. In a tribe of 150 people, power is not that big of a deal. There aren't that many resources to extract. There aren't a lot of possessions to hoard. Being the king of 150 people doesn't really get you anywhere. But being the king of, say, a city of 60,000, that definitely comes with perk. The thing is, though, we as humans are not that different. It's interesting, some of the celebrities that I've met, that's one of the first things that I notice is they're just people. And they're not even as exciting as they are in the magazines and in the movies. So a lot of this stratification and status and power was just smoke and mirrors. It was one giant magic show because of the fancy clothing, because you're lifted up on the litter above everybody's shoulders, because you live in the golden palace that makes you look cool. But underneath it all, at the end of the day, you are just a little skeleton clad in musculature and a few organs and hair and skin like the rest of us. But to have a large civilization, power must be maintained. Otherwise, the social contract just dissolves and we plunge into anarchy. And that is where religion comes in. Religion has historically always been and continues to be today the secret sauce to power. It's why Donald Trump, evil genius, on day 2, forms this whole entire faith coalition in the White House, why he has his own Trump Bible. I doubt that Donald Trump believes in God at all. Period. Full stop. That's just my personal opinion. But you know what he does believe in? He believes in the power that God holds over his followers. He doesn't have to believe in God. As long as his followers believe in God and they believe that he's fighting on God's side, he's golden. The man's an absolute genius. This video is not about Donald Trump, though. It is about religion as a triangulating force in families. We as humans have a really hard time with split allegiances. I mean, like if your best friends are in a fight and you're in the middle, how your brain just kind of shuts down. But eventually, you're just going to pick one. We have a real hard time being allied with two opposing forces. We have a variety of mechanisms that we use to determine which side to choose. But usually it follows our personal values and mores. When we are churchgoers, our religion becomes the ultimate power over everything. Studies show that people that participate in religion, especially high-demand religions like Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, Scientology, Catholicism, Islam, Orthodox Judaism, that this really interesting phenomenon happens where they other anything that doesn't fit into the core values of the church. So this can be a real bonding agent for anybody that's inside the church box. If I'm Catholic, super Orthodox Catholic, not just the Easter Sunday Catholics. I'm talking like people who they're not going to use the birth control. They tune in every day to see what the Pope's saying. If that's where I'm at in my religious observance, most of the people around me are going to fit into that box too. So if my husband and my children and my parents and my friends and neighbors are Catholic, that will actually bond us together because we're all in the box. We are the sheep inside the fence of safety under the watchful eye of our shepherd, Jesus, and the Pope. And we spend a lot of time and energy focusing on keeping those others out. We will send our kids to Catholic school so that they're not associating with the non-Catholic kids out there during their adolescent years, which are so formative. We want to keep them sheltered. We will date only Catholic men. Even if there are some better guys that are non-Catholic, we're going to stick with Catholic boys. We're going to have our wedding in the Catholic Church. We're going to baptize our babies to be Catholic. We're going to spend a lot of our time around other Catholics. And again, that's going to trauma bond us together with all of the other Catholics like super glue. But then what happens if one of your children decides to, join the Mormon church or become an atheist? We find ourselves seeing them as outside of the fence. They are now other. And that bond to the teachings of the church and that God that we think is up there in the universe is our primary relationship. And the child or the husband or whoever becomes secondary. I experience this myself from the inside out. A lot of the times when I do videos like this, I am not just spilling the tea on the Mormon church. I'm spilling my own tea from my own past as a Mormon monster for 44 years. I had a really close friend who left the church a decade ago before it was the cool thing to do and before the hashtag Exmo had ever been invented. And from the moment she stopped attending, she was no longer my friend. I didn't want my kids to play with her kids. She was going through some stuff and she was absolutely other. And I have actually never spoken to her again. I don't know her married name, so I can't find her on Facebook. A couple of my nieces and nephews went inactive in their college years. And I aggressively went after them, telling them that they were sinning, telling them that if they didn't come back to church, that they were going to burn in Mormon hell, aka the celestial kingdom, for the rest of eternity. And after that, I really didn't invite them to any of our family gatherings. They were dead to me. So focused on keeping this little flock in here safe. They were on their own. In a lot of ways, I guess it's karma that that's exactly what happened to me. And this letter is well-deserved after all the years that I did that to other people. But it still surprised me. When I left the Mormon church, I knew that I was probably going to be shunned and othered, but I also lived a couple thousand miles away from my mom, and most of my friends and family were a little bit removed from me. None of them were in my ward. I was just going to fly under the radar. I was going to wear modest clothes whenever I showed up at family gatherings, and I just wasn't going to mention it. Don't ask, don't tell. I was inadvertently pushed out of the ex-Mormon closet 2 weeks after leaving the church by one of my children who, they're just really honest, picked up the phone for Grandma one Sunday morning, and when Grandma asked, "Why aren't you guys in church?" the child was like, "Oh, we're not Mormon anymore." 2 weeks after we left the church, I was pushed out of the closet. You guys, I had converted to Christianity at that point too. So I was like in church every Sunday. I was doing all the same stuff, just at a different church. But that wasn't enough for my Mormon family. If you're not Mormon, you don't belong. The last real conversation that I had with my mom, she was crying because I was wearing a tank top. I didn't have my Mormon garments on. And she told me that because I had broken my temple covenants and taken off my garments, that every bad thing, the domestic violence, the poverty, the homelessness, every bad thing that was happening in my life was because I was under the influence of Satan. That is a quote. My mother was crying and saying, "It is so hard as a mom to watch my daughter under the power of Satan." It's not her fault that she's like this. She's actually a really good mom. She's a really good Mormon mom. And at the top, there is this entity that is triangulating her against me. And she's not capable of splitting her loyalty between these two opposing forces. Church is going to win every time, and thus my kids don't have grandparents. I'll be hanging out in the comment section to hear what you think about this.